Go. Hello and welcome, friends out there, to another episode of 30 Minutes with a Modern Mystic. Welcome, Michael.
So, thank you, Sascha. And death and dying seem to be the rage at the moment.
As you can guess by Michael's black pullover, today's topic is even black, it might be blue. Today,
Well, they tell me my wife and daughter tell me I'm a bit colorblind. To me, this looks like black. They tell me it's a navy blue. I don't know.
So today's topic is death and dying.
And really, of course, when you're into death and dying, the subject is life and living. But
how did you come up with the topic? Let's start there.
I didn't. The simple fact is, this week I've counseled a couple of people who have been dying. One is stage 4 terminal cancer, lung cancer, and the other one was something I can't remember quite. And I was talking to them about life and living while they're involved in death and dying. And it's quite a paradox. And Carolyn came up with this idea because she said it's number one priority in many families. People are dying, even though it's hidden from the public. I mean, over 179,000 died within 60 days of getting the shots in England.
Would you mind me starting this off with a question this time?
Not at all. In fact, I quite welcome it.
Would you say that your relationship with death and dying has gradually changed over the course of your life, or was it a sudden change when you had that spiritual awakening?
No, it's been a gradual change. It started when I was 15. I might have said this before. I never know what I said where. But when I was 10, I got sunburn incredibly badly. And I had both sunburn and sunstroke. And I was laid up for 3 weeks. Apparently, I nearly died. I came very, very close to death. And at the end of that, I had 17 carbuncles, multi-headed boils, all at the same time. And I remember so well, I was 10 years old. I couldn't move my body. I couldn't walk. I couldn't open the door to the bedroom if it had been closed, because if I did, you'd feel the skin stretch and then and then this pus would trickle down from somewhere. It was pretty bad. Apparently the carbuncles are why I lived, because if I couldn't have got rid of that overload of white blood cells, it would have killed me anyway. So I'm 15, and we had family doctors in those days, and I'm 15 and I've cut my knee and I've got to have 3 stitches. And there was no anesthetic for stitches in those days, and cutting the knee was nothing. Having the stitches put in, that was not good. Anyway, Dr. Robson did it, and he was a nice guy. And he said to me, he said, there we are, you're all stitched up. He said, you didn't die when you were 10, but he said, very few people will never know how close you came to it. And I remember saying, I felt I was dying and I didn't really care about it. He said, no, at 10, you really don't. You haven't learned the fear. And but he said, now you're all fixed, he said, and you should enjoy longevity. Now, I was 15 and I'd left school, and longevity. Excuse me.
You had to look up the word.
Excuse me. So no, I had no idea what longevity was. Nobody ever said it to me. And so I said, I'm a bit smart. I said, so how will I manage that then? Which didn't let him know that I didn't know. I think he knew. He said, you're going to live a long life, because he said you've got a long neck and short legs, and that is the recipe for longevity. And I never forgot it. And from that moment, I took hold of this belief that I was going to live a long life. And as the years rolled past, I sort of more and more saw that it was not something that had to be said, but something was said for a reason. So often in our lives, things that sound meaningless and flippant actually have a deeper meaning if you look at it. And because when you realize nothing is by accident, nothing is by chance. I remember I had a woman who was mentally disturbed, came to a retreat, and she said something to me, and I was about to dismiss it because of her mental disturbance. It was an absolute scathing criticism. And then it occurred to me, listen to her. She's saying to you what nobody else will say. And I remember, and I played it back to myself several times, and I thought, she's right. And I took it on board and changed a certain pattern because I figured she was right. So we dismiss, especially mentally disturbed people. And so as the years changed, my relationship with age, I noticed, was not particularly fearful because a lot of people are flippant about it until they get to about 70. And then they can hear knock, knock, knock on that door. And a lot of them are not well. And so my relationship with death slowly changed, yes, as I moved into my spirituality. And it went through a particular change when Trini died. And every day I'm talking to her, and I know her. And I knew the very way she spoke was exactly her terminology. And then I remember her energy signature, which would come because there was no her to look at, but this energy signature would be there. And it came to me stronger and stronger. If you're dead, how can this be happening? And of course, you realize there is no death. And gradually that is no death became stronger and stronger. And then I went through the experience of unconditional love. And that really cemented it because I realized everything is love and love doesn't age or die. And gradually that love became energy of love. And I began to realize that even aging doesn't have to happen. And death, eventually, yes, you let go of your physical body, but that's not death, that's letting go. If I step out of my car, I'm not dead. I stepped out of that vehicle because it was appropriate to step out. And so when the time comes of real death, you step out of your body and let the body go. It served you well and you thank it and you move on into life because you never leave life. So it was a process.
Personally, thinking about death, there are two sides of it that come up in terms of the spiritual sense or the purpose maybe of it. Like one, I can't help but feel that there's an enormous amount of grace in that act of not having to remember all the atrocities and all the stuff that we went to and the suffering and everything, and just starting off from a clean slate, even though on a deeper level it's not a clean slate. We carry so much stuff with it, but still there's this huge amount of grace in this act of just like being in this innocent newborn child situation. So there's that where it seems like in death there's healing in some way. And then on the other side, there is the creation of death in our consciousness as something that basically has become bigger and bigger and separated us from who we truly are, and become this kind of driving force behind all of our fears, really. So it seems, and that seems to be something that, like in some way, even might have been instilled into humanity, by some authorities, by some, however you want to call them, but into human consciousness to separate us from who we truly are. So there are these two aspects, which I find interesting, because one seems like something divine and graceful and helpful, and on the other side, this whole fear of dying and fear of death and this whole illusion thing seems to be something pretty dark that has been forced upon us.
Well, now you're talking about the two streams of human consciousness. The whole idea of death was, as you said, It was a time of healing and of rebalancing and redressing and coming back with a clean slate. But you then have to live with some sort of a connection with your own divinity. You have to live with some sort of connection with love, which is the very essence of our being. You have to have some connection with truth. But what has happened is we're deeply, deeply, deeply embedded in illusion. And so for most people today, certainly not all people, but most people today, death doesn't heal, it doesn't end, it doesn't repair, it doesn't redress or rebalance. And so we come back incarnate with many of the same problems that we went out with.
Just one thing is, would you say that this is because of the intensity of the patterns that we create in our consciousness, that it's not working anymore?
Okay, the intensity, because of the ignorance we've created about who we are, and because we dive deeper into that ignorance. And also, I'm doing a lot of metaphysical traveling at the moment, and as I work into my book deeper, and I'm in some unusual situations, certainly didn't expect. And one of the things that's been pointed out to me is the depth of the illusion in which we live.
That's what I meant, this kind of
everything
intensity.
Physical is an illusion. The truth is, the greater truth that we left eons ago. The greater truth is we are spiritual beings in a spiritual world, or we are metaphysical beings in a metaphysical world. But both words mean the same. I tend to use metaphysical, but I want people to realize that is spiritual. So, in truth is, all life and all world and the universe is spiritual. It's a spiritual, metaphysical reality. But we're completely consumed in the physical reality, in the three-dimensional reality, totally consumed in it. I am, to a degree. I go out in my forest garden, I'm involved and I love it, and I completely forget that this is all illusion. And it brings me joy, etc., etc. So it's okay. But when the illusion is damaging, and one of those great illusions has now hidden, as we have created, is fear. Fear is probably the master and the greatest of all illusions because it doesn't exist. There's absolutely no reality. We have to create it. So everything we fear, we have to create. So I no longer create that, and that changes your life completely because I don't create it. There's nothing. I'm an immortal being of love. How can I? What is there to fear?
And from a very sinister perspective of whether it's Illuminati or however you want to name them, that fear of death or death itself seems to be the perfect instrument to control humanity.
That's interesting. I'll go back to the beginning of the question, though. So we have like two streams of human consciousness. Unfortunately, the mainstream. And another thing I was pointed out to me, and I'll come back into what I was saying, like involved with the global elite, the Illuminati or whatever, involved with them are the Greys and many of the Draconians. But I realized quite a long while ago, they're all on a low level of consciousness. Now, the being I was conversing with is a six-dimensional being that even metaphysically I couldn't see. And so we have four densities, basically three densities on this in our 3D world. They have 8 densities. And so it brought itself down to a fourth density level so that I could then see just energy. And I could, enough to give me sort of some reference to it as energy. And so it had to bring itself down. And what it pointed out is like the Draconians or reptilians, however you call them, and many of these races all have higher and lower consciousness, varying degrees higher and lower. They all have them. However, on all those planets, the higher consciousness is dominant. and it's the few with the lower consciousness. Here, it's a complete reverse. The mass have a lower consciousness, and by that I don't mean worse or bad, I just mean a lower consciousness, and the few have the higher consciousness. So that's our dilemma. That's the dilemma. So with the mass, which is lower consciousness, which includes all the media, pretty well social media, mainstream, all the media, and pretty well all the novelists and books you read, everything comes in, not everything, but it mostly all comes in on a lower consciousness. So that holds us there. It holds people there. Now, I've broken away from it. You're breaking away from it, and many are. There are millions of us, but there are billions who are not. So it doesn't matter how many millions, the billions are not. And so that mainstream lower consciousness has a shocking relationship with death, and now it's hidden. But that simple fact is the vaccination shots, it's escalating faster and faster, the death. It's all hidden, which is an amazing job. I mean, that's pretty incredible on its own. That's hidden from us. And so there is a mainstream, huge fear of death. And there's an agenda to kill out at least, 3 to 4 billion people. Because when they control this planet, and nobody owns anything except the elite owns everything, so everybody is enslaved comfortably, and everybody is vaccinated, no exceptions, no vaccination, then you're quietly done away with. So everybody's vaccination, everybody's compulsory compliant, and everybody is happy with everything. I'm so happy because they've got their food and their place to live, and they don't realize that they will never realize they're enslaved. This is the idea of the Great Reset. Now, unfortunately, people in my stream, in the higher stream of consciousness, some of them, this frightens them. To me, it doesn't frighten because it's not going to happen. This is not going to come right the way through. However, I also see that for those who believe in this, they create their own belief. It's not created for them, despite they might say, I'm conditioned. Yes, we are conditioned, but I've broken out the conditioning, you've broken out of it, and millions have broken out of it. And for me, I see that those who don't break out of it within the next 6 months to a year, then it will be too late. They will continue in this, incarnating in this continuing scenario, which will be theirs to work out over the next however many thousands of years. I will leave it. People like us will leave it and move into completely different experiences. So for me and us, it's nothing to fear, but there is nothing to fear anyway, because if you continue on in the mainstream incarnation, you still have the same opportunities for enlightenment to step out of the illusion. They'll always be there. They've always been there, and they always will be. But we are responsible for our own creation. And one of the things we don't do is create light. And one thing we do is create dark. And we create fear, and we create rage and anger and blame.
Let's
we're
try.
lost in that. And let me just say, that what we're lost in is a form of death. It's a form of dying.
Let's try and stick a little more with the idea of like discussing maybe also what is death to you, what is what it isn't, and then move on towards maybe what dying could be and how we could gracefully die and peacefully, and also use the process of dying as a healing process for ourselves.
Well, we tend to live our belief patterns, and for a lot of people, death is the end. And so they go through what they consider as a form of ending. And then, of course, that breaks down because it's an illusion that no longer has an energy to drive it.
So let me just say here that based on what you just said, I conclude that there is, in your experience, there is now no one death experience.
No,
There's
there's
as
no one.
many death experience as there are humans.
Pretty nearly as many, but again, the streams of consciousness tend to, like Yogananda, for instance, I believe the story is that he gave a talk and laid down and just died. And a
That was,
month later, his body was as fresh as if he was using it and
yep.
smelled sweetly of roses. So he was showing there is complete control. There is no death. I'm no longer in this body, but I still control it. But of course, for those there, it probably was pretty graphic. Other people, mainstream, said, rubbish, I don't believe it. And I'm continually more and more amazed when I read Nexus magazine, the people who all argue with each other, everyone is convinced they're right.
Sure.
There's no suggestion. Of course, I could be wrong. It's just I'm right. That is the left brain intellect, and it sees death as something pretty terrifying.
Because I feel like in the beginning we moved into very specific areas quite fastly, I would like to bring it back to a little broader discussion regarding.
That's why
Yeah, like what would you say is death to you? Is it just the soul leaving a body?
Okay.
What is death in your definition?
Death is when the body energy is losing its frequency and it can no longer retain connection with the chakras of the metaphysical, greater metaphysical self. And so the body slowly or rapidly drops away and the body dies, but you continue on in the metaphysical reality.
Okay,
For
perfect.
many people, that is as dramatic as being attacked by a lion and mauled. You know, they have no preparation. And so there is mostly what I call a halfway hospital. And many people are traumatized, just killed in a car crash, have died after a long and painful experience of terminal cancer. And I'm a Catholic, so I can't have assisted death. I've got to suffer because the good Lord said I must suffer. And so they suffer dreadfully. And when they die, completely traumatized. So for these people, it's like a halfway hospital. And I won't explain that. It's a resting place, recuperation, but the illusion is not taken away from you unless you release it. You have to release it. You created it, it's yours. So the illusion continues, and your illusion, your version of what is real, will then continue on in your experience of death.
Okay, what would you say initiates the process of death or dying?
How do you mean initiate it? Wrong
Like
living.
I mean from a soul kind of level or from a metaphysical level. When
Okay.
and why does it? So because there's all this, some people say
Yes.
it's destiny, your soul or whatever. Like there's all these theories out there. So I just wanted to hear your take on. Just wanted to hear your take on how you experience the when
I
actually.
mean, one theory I heard, you only have so many breaths.
I like that one.
So, well, then live holding your breath as long as you can. Take up aqua diving. You should live a long time. Oh, God. Anyway, so basically, death is determined by two things. One, many people live in a way that is abusive to their body. My Carolyn's son, Chucky, he died of alcoholic.
So it's kind of like slow suicide.
It's slow suicide. There's no question about that. 20 years suicide. So that he died of pure abuse. Looking at his life, I realized he pulled in a few things that he needed to learn. But basically, so if you don't abuse the body and kill it, then it's a soul determination, because we are not a body personality with a soul. We're a soul with a body personality. So the soul, now sometimes a child will be born, take 3 or 4 breaths and die. the soul as experience, its real experience was about being carried, being in the womb, connecting with the mother, something there that was missed. It needed to redress, rebalance. It wasn't about living a life as a growing up. It didn't need that. The soul didn't need that. Now that's more when the soul is pretty aware and pretty conscious. It withdraws. This is a kindergarten planet with young souls, and the souls go through a lot that they didn't need necessary to go through. So the determination of death is physical abuse, emotional, mental, and physical abuse, or the soul saying, okay, I'm done, I'm out of here. And often those end abruptly. Like Trini, I won't explain this, but you know what I mean. When Michael walked out and I walked in, from that point, she started saying, I just want to go home. And for 20 years, she gave herself to me, Mixael, but she wanted to go home. And eventually I knew the very year, and I knew it was going to happen. I had 2 years of knowing she was going to withdraw. So her soul was telling me, be prepared because I'm leaving. And the year that it all happened, I was still shocked, but I knew it was going to happen. I didn't expect the way, an aneurysm, and so suddenly she's gone. And then 2 days later, she couldn't have been happier. She was over the moon. Everything was wonderful. For me, it was not so good, I can assure you. But there was no fear of her. Intellectually, yes, she feared it. As a soul, she couldn't wait to embrace it. So you get this dichotomy, and it's not all cut and dried. But this is what I say to people: the way you choose to live your life, you are choosing also your dying and your death. You're the creator of it. It doesn't have to be cancer or anything. We're the creators of our living, which takes us through death and incarnation and back out, the whole long cycle.
Okay, so if we follow that that idea of being the creator of our lives, would you then ideally get to the point where because you're in touch with your soul, feeling that, okay, now it's enough, and then you kind of prepare in some way, and then you're just leaving your body peacefully because you got that feeling from your soul communicated to you somehow?
Joel Goldsmith, he was a spiritual teacher of my generation, and I read his books, The Silence of the Sound of the... Anyway, I read his books, and one evening he was probably in his early 70s, and he had a lot of people invited to his home, and he said to several of them, look into my eyes, what do you see? And none of them could sort of figure out what they saw. And that evening he said, I've written everything I have to say. I've said everything I've had to say. Apparently I'm booked up for the next 2 years, saying everything I have to say again and writing more of everything I've already said. He said, we'll see. And when he went to bed at 11 o'clock, he fell into a coma at 1 o'clock in the morning, and he departed at 4 or 5 a.m., and nothing they could do could stop it. And then they realized what he was all about the evening, goodbye. And, can you see, what do you see in my eyes? Nobody saw goodbye. And he'd done it all, he'd said it all. And so nothing wrong with him. I don't know what they put on his death certificate. They always have to come up with something that fits in the illusion,
right?
Never really the truth of it. I mean, most of them should have suicide on it, long-term suicide.
Right. In other words, your soul knows when it's time to depart from that physical experience you're having right now. And I think you're separating soul from personality. Right. When you get to the development of Joel Goldsmith, he knew, I am a soul. There is no separation anymore, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying. So ideally, if you walk that spiritual path of becoming more and more conscious, you're feeling in touch with your soul, and the moment that your soul kind of says, "Okay, buddy, it's time to go, you feel that as well, and you take the preparations. That will be the ideal.
I feel that now,
Mhm.
like the soul and my personality, I feel is one expression.
Okay.
And I was reading the other day about, in the Reader's Digest, when you're over 65, this can happen to your kidneys. When you're over 75, this can happen to your kidneys. They didn't put when you're over 85, this can happen. And I read it and I laughed. I said, sorry, but these kidneys are mine. I'll determine what happens to my kidneys, not a person who writes about 10,000 kidneys. These are my kidneys. And I look after them and I love them and I talk to them. And that makes a difference. I talk to this body as a living, intelligent entity, which is me and not fully me. And I talk to it and embrace it. And I tell it that it's loved every day. That, 50 trillion cells, those 50 trillion cells, I wouldn't say they're self-determining, but they're conscious. They have intelligence. The whole body does. And so when you do that and let's say you are dying and you didn't fight dying, but you embrace life. This is the problem. The guy with the lung cancer, he'd written his eulogy, he'd organized his funeral. I said, you completely embraced death. I said, have you finished with life? He said, life's finished with me. I said, that is nonsense. I said, you're still a creator. I can't talk about it here, but I gave him a way that I said, you can live. I don't care if it's terminal fourth stage. If you have the determination and you do what I tell you, you can live. And no good writing and asking me, because I would be in big trouble if I shared this around. And so he's looking at doing that, and we'll see what happens. But I said, you've got to tear up your eulogy and all that. I said, you do not focus on death and dying, you focus on life and living. You're not trying to defeat dying, you're doing your best to live. Whole focus has got to change to life and living and the excitement of the moment. I said to him, you can do this. I think he can. Whether he will or not, that's up to the soul. Now, if the soul says, hey, this guy's really messed up, I'm out of here, then he'll be going anyway. And I told him that.
Sure. I mean, I think today's session needs to be a little longer because I feel we still need to cover a little bit more ground, and I think that's okay.
Fine.
I think that's okay. So we got the soul that actually knows when it's time to go. We got the body, which for most, or the personality with the body, which for most.
Not every soul knows when to go, any more than every child knows what an adult knows. You've got to remember, this is a planet full of young souls.
Okay.
And this is a whole learning place for them.
Okay, so let's just finish with that section, that group of people that have kind of souls which are evolved to a level where they kind of are aware of, okay, now it's time to move on to something different. And then you have the vast majority of people where that's not the case, and they live without knowing anything about their soul, without any relation with their spiritual bodies, with their higher being or whatsoever. So they have to be forcefully pulled out of their physical experience because it's just too painful. It's like there's a limit, like a threshold is reached, and that's just it. So what is it if it's not the soul? Let's move to that next level. Is there a divine intervention? Does God say, now it's your time to go? And then ideally the soul realize that, or so let's move on to that stage. If the soul is not aware of that, what mechanism? Is it karma? What mechanism makes it happen in that case?
So what you're saying is for the mainstream consciousness.
Yeah, for example, yeah.
Okay, for mainstream consciousness, then you'll find that death is generally brought about by the abuse of the body.
Okay.
I mean, seriously, the jab is an abuse of the body, and it's designed to reduce the population. COVID didn't do it. Hey, no problem. We
might get into trouble with this video.
Yes, we might, but I mean, it's still the truth.
Yeah.
And I tend to, people got to face the truth. But yes, of course, because that is all part of the conspiracy to they're part of the elite. You know, they're all owned by the elite. All these medias, social medias. The front man is just a front man. People have no idea the power of what is owned by the elites. Every company, as it comes down from the top to the bottom, is owned by the global elite.
Just on a more personal note, it's off topic to what you were just saying, but I feel like a deep resonance with that trust of, okay, when it's my time to go, it's my time to go, and there's no fear or anything. And
That's
and
that's
I
nice. One minute, let me say that's nice if it is trust.
yeah, I
That's
mean,
wonderful.
I've always had that. And just let me just finish that thought for a moment. And the way that I feel about it is, I feel like it's some kind of faith or trust in my personal relationship with the divine, with God. That's how I feel about it, at least. It's not so much like I feel that this is my relationship with my soul, but it's really like this supreme creation, just like faith into it and just trust and love. It's going to be all right. Like, if it's my moment to go, it's my moment to go. So following you along, it seems like there wouldn't be any divine intervention or any that supreme creation doesn't have much saying in the process of dying or in death in general. That is more a soul kind of thing.
The thing is, when you say divine intervention, you're talking immediate separation.
Right. That's true. That's true.
The God is separate and can intervene.
I mean, it's all just words. It's difficult.
I know it's incredibly difficult. You should try writing it.
Yeah.
And luckily, you can keep going over it and get it pretty much closer. But when you realize you are the divine and you can intervene at any stage and leave the illusion and begin to live a life based in truth. When I say you, I mean everyone. You can live a life based in truth. But the only intervention in what's going on is going to be us. We are our own saviors. And if we want a savior, then we save ourselves. But there's nothing to save us from except an extended journey. And so it gets very, very lost in words, concepts, the intellect. The simple truth is, what is the meaning of life? You are. You are the meaning of life. Totally, utterly, you are the meaning of life. So my question is, do you give it meaning? Now, if you give meaning to life, life will tend to continue that process because you're giving life meaning and it wants it to continue its expression. But a lot of people by the age of 60, they are no longer giving life any meaning at all. They're sitting in God's waiting room. And although they might play a round of golf and throw a few bowls and poke around in the garden, somewhere in them, they've done this thing called retired. And that retirement, that whole concept of retirement is like a switch has turned off. Now I'm no longer living in a certain way, I'm living in another way. Now for few, that's incredibly positive. For a few. For the most, it is not a positive thing, it's a negative. And at that moment, they begin dying toward death, because that's what it's all about. When you retire, you're heading toward death. So they hit a switch and they begin their dying process while they're laughing with their pals over a beer and whatever. They've begun the dying process, which isn't bad or wrong. I'm not criticizing this, but they've somehow quit the life process and nobody seems to know.
They probably,
and so the dying,
yep.
the death is gone, but the dying, that's what people create. I'm not doing it. I'm creating a living, and I'm going to create it until at least I would like 140 years. If the Great Reset works, then you can take me out anytime you like. But because I'm not going to be part of that. But it's pretty alarming when you know what they have planned. But it's not going to happen. I could go into that more, but we'll talk about that some other time. And so dying is a process that begins whatever age you are, the moment you quit life. The alcoholic, they are an alcoholic in denial. They've now begun their process of dying. It took my Chucky, who was a lovely young man, it took him 20 years. But his process, and they say now, as soon as you're born, you begin dying. Wrong.
To stay there for a moment, what would you say is the main cause of people quitting living?
I think first of all, they don't know they are. And second is fear. I had a good friend who was into his spirituality, Dennis. And I said to him one Sunday night, I said, I love you, Dennis. I'll see you tomorrow. Next morning at 5 a.m., he had a heart attack and died. He was afraid of life. He was incredibly sensitive. Chucky was. Many of these people has a sensitivity which is over-personalized. I'm a number 2, which happens to be master number 11. But I grew up with this terrible sense of personally, everything anybody said to me was a personal attack. Everything was personal. I let that go gradually. I had to realize this doesn't work. This is ridiculous. And so I let that grow. But most people get older and older, still with it, and everything is a personal attack. Everything is said to them. They go to work, and workplaces can be rough and uncaring, and they can be very harsh with their words.
So
and
I think metaphorically, you're pulling the curtain through. You close it a little more with every trauma that you experience.
Every little daily encounter, the shopkeeper is nasty, the workplace that is uncaring, the curtains are gradually drawing over.
And suddenly you're like this old grumpy.
And you will facilitate whatever will facilitate which will ever bring you toward the dying. You're in the dying, which will bring you toward death. Whether you accidentally step out in front of a car, whatever, you will facilitate it. There's nothing by accident. And lots of people say, yeah, I know that. They haven't a clue what that means. They have no idea of the depth of that. Every thought we have, our thoughts are either taking us into the dying process or keeping us in the living process. And I've listened to people, I've sat in restaurants and heard a person behind me talking, he dominated the table, and I thought, well, I'll give you 5 years the most, because his whole language was dying. Basically, it was critical also, but he doesn't realize he is what he was criticizing. There's nothing out there. He was it. And so he would kill himself. He was in the process of dying and he didn't know it. What could I say?
To close the topic that I touched upon before, does, in your view, God have any say in death? Or is
Yes,
is it a purely soul?
Look, let's get this clear. There is no God, entity, deity, or figurehead out there
separate from
God.
you. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This is a conditioning of religion. Mm-hmm. It's a powerful condition. However, there is an energy of supreme creation.
I refer to that energy.
And there are about 49 billion universes, all in this one supreme energy. And it doesn't pick out Carolyn Smith. You have been a naughty girl. I mean, it is completely, because there is no death.
So it's completely soul programmed.
It's completely the program we create. There is no death. There's only life. So what, you've got to intervene? What's there to intervene? Nothing's going wrong. There's nothing to intervene because your body's dying. Well, hello, you've already lost 2,500. What is one more? No, I mean, this is the reality. This is the reality. All the people are dying. None of them will be dead.
How about we spend the next 10 minutes on giving some advice in case you're dying right now. Sounds a little weird, but in case you find yourself or you find a loved one, or you're somehow in touch with death or dying right now, what is it that you could do from your perspective?
From my perspective, it's a bit late. but I would look for what gives you joy. I would look for where your passion can express itself, and I would focus on that. I would focus on living in whatever there is of joy. Now, certainly some people, let's say, are on dialysis, which is 3 days a week and maybe about 7 or 8 hours a day. And that is incredibly dominant in their lives. Their life has to revolve around it in the hospital or at home. And there are exceptions, which makes that very, very difficult.
Yeah, also pain, right? I mean, also people in excruciating pain. This makes it very difficult.
If you're in excruciating pain, I would say drug it down a bit, quite honestly, because there's no point in that. But Patch Adams had a Patch Adams was brilliant. He formed the organization of clowns to make people laugh. Now, Patch Adams was dying of cancer, terminal cancer. And so he said, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die laughing. So he got movies, every movie of fun that he could find, and all day, all his waking hours, he watched these movies and laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed, and the cancer disappeared because his whole hormonal energy changed, his whole energy lifted, his consciousness. And isn't it interesting? Laughter lifts your consciousness, as long as it's not laughter at other people's pain. And a lot of our laughter is, home videos. You laugh at people doing the stupidest things to themselves, but they hurt.
Sure.
The person who runs up the diving board, bounces, and then spins a double salt and lands on the diving board. That stuff hurts. We can laugh, but it hurts. So when you're laughing from the heart instead of the head, you're laughing from the heart because it fills you with fun and joy. You're on an upward lifting scale of the consciousness, and your whole body goes through a change, and you can leave terminal illness behind.
So find something that brings you joy.
There, folks, there's a clue there. Follow it up.
So number one, find something that brings you joy.
Find something that brings you joy and laughter, even if it's just general old-fashioned laughter. Keep your energy high. Focus as much as you can on the quality of life. So if 3/4 of your body can't move, focus on the quarter that can. And if your whole body, you're paralyzed from the neck down, find the capacity to give blessings that you can see and read. You can watch movies and videos. Maybe you can even talk, and you can hear. You can listen to beautiful solfeggio music, The Power of Love, 528. Do everything you can that's going to lift your energy.
So number two is
miracles. Well, let me just finish. Miracles happen. Miracles happen, and we are the creator of miracles. And to do it, you have to be conscious. There are not subconscious miracles. There are conscious miracles. And we are, even if you're dying of terminal cancer, you are still, in every moment of your life, you are creating the content and direction of every moment of your life. And you can still create living if it's in your greatest interest as a soul to do so. And you'll be surprised how often it is, because there is nothing more empowering, self-empowering than healing yourself. It's incredibly self-empowering.
I agree. So number two, find something to be grateful for.
Gratitude. Carolyn had the breast cancer scare and it passed. and it's all long gone. And she's still every morning, maybe 2 o'clock, she wakes up, and maybe 5 o'clock, she moves into a meditation, a joyful meditation of gratitude, just sharing her gratitude with the universe, with everything. It's pretty big. She does the Healing Humanity meditation on the first Sunday of every month. She does the bones of it, and that gratitude and that what she speaks is so deeply embedded in the soul and heart of who she is.
How about
So gratitude, huge. Gratitude cannot be overrated.
I think these two are like great pieces of advice for people who are in the process of dying themselves. How about if you have a loved one, your spouse, your parent, your whatever, best friend dying? What do you think is the best thing you can do for them?
The best thing you could do for them is ask them to come and live with you in their dying process, so you become their carer. You do not have a negative emotional connection with them. You have an emotional connection because they're a relative or mother or father, and you love them, but you only express love. You talk to them about what a wonderful thing. There is no death, and you're going on a new journey, an incredible journey. And the more you're loving, and the more you allow me to love you, and the more you see the beauty of life, the more incredible this journey is going to be. So you do the best you can, not to join them in their fear and misery and pity. They don't want that. To lift them up out of their fear and self-pity and their misery, to imbue them with love and joy and the love that you share, the love of living, up till the moment they die. Keep them on the love of living. You might get a surprise. But the love of living, the worst thing do you know why 40% of carers die before the person they're caring for?
Because they all
30%.
absorb the stuff, right?
Because they connect with them in the low level of pain and suffering, and they absorb it, and it kills them. They're not ready for it. It kills them. 40% over. That's incredible.
Yep, that's why all the doctors die also.
Doctors, they have one of the shortest life expectations, unless being a doctor gives them joy and they live long. Trini, when she had 4 babies, her gynecologist, the guy who delivers them, he loved his women. And at 85, he was still delivering babies. He loved his mothers, as he called them, all my delightful mothers. He loved it. And he went nearly 100, I think, before he died. And so, yeah, it's and dentists, they don't have the longest life expectation, because you sit in the chair and tell them everything is wrong with your life. And hairdressers also copy it. They take on other people's stuff. There's non-stop chatter from some of them about what's wrong. And they take it on and they take it home. And they don't realize this isn't mine. It becomes part of them. You watch heavy movies, all the emotions that brings in are your emotions. And you think, oh, come on, it was a movie. No, that's part of the illusion. My God, what people don't know is terminal. Seriously.
It's been almost an hour. I think this episode has come to its natural death.
Yeah, it's been dying from when we began.
Yeah. Is it because this module didn't choose living?
I think the greatest killer, you asked the question, of humanity is ignorance about who we are. That is, in the end, the greatest killer. Because if we knew who we are, we would treat ourselves, and our relationship with self would completely change.
But then all the pharma industry and all these businesses would be out of business.
Hallelujah. Wouldn't that be good?
I couldn't imagine that world.
In my stream of consciousness, they're all dying already.
They're all like,
they're already in their death throes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Michael. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And this has been fun.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. as always, if you are enjoying this content, help us spread the word, the vibe, and everything. The links below. Just hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, share this link with your loved ones, with your friends. There are a couple links below this video where you can support Michael, where you can join his courses, where you can follow him, where you can comment on his stuff, you can read his articles. It's been great having you here, and see you next episode.
Thank you.